Welcome back to the Smugglers Den. We are here with episode 10. That's right, we've hit double digits. I'm your host, Tiny Grimes, and as always, I'd like to thank swdestinydb.com for hosting the Smugglers Den. It's a great site for all kinds of information about Star Wars Destiny. You can go to brokenegggames.com if you want to support the show, buy your merchandise, check out, put TG Games in the discount code coupon, and you can support the channel that way. Or you can go to Patreon, Tiny Grimes. We're having all kinds of great discussions there, including a really extensive talk about a tier list. And this episode is going to be a little different than normal. The second half of the show is actually going to have a second guest, and that is going to be two-time Game of Thrones champion and all-around great guy, John Bruno. I'm going to talk with him about his thoughts of the game as a newer player who's a really good card player. But we're going to start with our intrepid, resilient, week-to-week co-host, Mr. Jason Flanzer. And Jason, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. If you want to get to Bruno, you've got to go through me.
You're the gatekeeper, and then he's the final boss. In.
That's
right.
right.
That's fair. So we actually see each other every Wednesday at Paper Hero Games up in Sherman Oaks, California. A great little store, doing well. Actually, I shouldn't even say little. They're darn spacious. But Jason, you weren't there this week, so should I assume you haven't touched Star Wars Destiny since last week, or have you been playing some stuff?
I have been playing a lot online, and I also played in the event at Next Gen Games on Monday.
Ooh, how'd you do in that one?
I got second playing Jabba Jango versus Balatik Jango Trooper.
Ooh.
And it was really good. I removed 4 total damage out of his first 2 turns, and if you do not include that 4 damage, then he did 19 damage in 2 turns. So it was not going to be a game I was going to win.
Wow, doesn't even sound possible. That's very impressive.
With it, and I had shields. I went second, so I had shields at the beginning of the game. And at the end of my first turn, I had Jango dead, who had 2 shields, and Jabba had like 3 damage on him. And plus, like I said, I removed some damage. So with between when he killed Jango, Balatik going again, it was just a massive amount of damage. And it was like, well, I guess that's it. Killing Jango top of 2, and then
that's tough.
Moving on to kill Jabba easily.
I'm happy to hear you mention Jabba Jango, because that's a deck I'm going to do a write-up on next week, I think. It's kind of a secretish deck. I love that deck, but I will say this. When Jango dies, you lose. And Jango dies often.
Okay, if Jango dies early, you lose.
Yes.
If Jango dies turn 4 and on, you actually have the tools to win very easily.
Yeah.
And you also kind of understand the way the game is going. So it's very weak to burst damage, but you know what I'll say? Every deck is really weak to burst damage. I mean, it's very likely that if you're playing Jango Veers and you lose Jango top of 2, like I lost my Jango, that Veers probably isn't going to carry the rest of the game.
Yep.
Unless he ends up with 3 weapons that very turn that the guy dies, Veers and his 9 health are likely also to die.
Yeah, I will say this, though. It's less likely that you get that massive outburst with Jabba Jango just because you have less range sides. Like, it's more consistent because you have all the focus to turn them to damage. But Veer's Jango can just sometimes go, boom, 12. And you're like, well,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not doing that as much, but you do have a lot of consistent dice options and non-dice options by using the yellow cards that are afforded to you. So
yeah,
it's pretty brutal, and I really do enjoy it. And I actually think it handles. It's more of a game. It's definitely a little more fun than re-rolling your dice. And also, sometimes you really punish those players because I always try to roll out Jabba first. If you get the 4 discards, sometimes those decks like Jango Veers just go flat.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. You hit their weapons and their rerolls. That turns over unless they get super lucky. Someone actually ran it at the event last night and got tied for 4th. We had 17 players. They tied for 4th.
Oh, wow,
they went 3-1. So I was pretty happy. This was a guy who I'd never seen him play a Jango deck, and he said, I don't really like playing Jango, and I just put this Jango Jabba deck together, and I thought it would be bad, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. That's a deck I've been working on that I really like. It's actually my favorite deck, but like you said, it can die turn 2, and when it does, you just literally lose, which, like you said, you generally lose anyway, but it feels worse. Because at least with other decks, you're like, all right, I know I probably lost, but I can do some damage, and maybe I can use some trickery. But with Jabba, you're just like, well, I might as well resign right here.
Yeah, if Jabba doesn't get like a holdout blaster pass to him and then you immediately lay down a flamethrower on top of him, he's probably going to be dying.
That's my favorite.
Although if you do
game.
get that flamethrower.
I did do this once, Jason. I went, Django died. It was late game, and my opponent was very confident that he had won. And he only had like one character. He did some damage and claimed. And then I went like overwrite something with flamethrower, overwrite something else with flamethrower, roll Jabba, get like 2 focus sides, and then the flamethrower. One of them hit, and then another died, and so I was like able to turn 1 to a resource, 2 resources, turn the other flamethrower to the 4, swing for 8, and win. And the guy was just stunned and angry.
No, I know. I've really made a lot of people mad losing to Jabba online, like just Jabba. I lost Django turn 2 against Double Trooper, Night Sister. Maybe it was Double Night Sister, Double Trooper, and he kills Django turn 2, and it's just Jabba, and I win the game.
That's pretty hard. You must have gotten a thermal off that game.
I did get a thermal off that game.
Yeah.
But still, that's in your wheelhouse, and that's possible.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's a cool deck. I really like it. It's my favorite deck. It has lots of neat tricks. No one sees the 7-point fight dirty coming until it comes.
I know. You roll out, then you roll out, and you're like, well, this fight dirty. And you're like, what?
Yeah. It's shot. 7 points on a fight dirty is hard to mitigate, right? You're going to really electroshock the resource Jabba die in case they happen to have the fight dirty? I doubt it.
Exactly.
All right, so I played in the tournament. That's the Bala Stormtrooper Django deck. That's crazy good. I went 3-0 in my first 3 games, all good, pretty easy games. I had one really fun encounter. I played the guy who runs Star Wars Destiny DB, the site that hosts us. He's in our meta. And we played, and I hadn't gotten to play him yet in a tournament. And it was a really fun game. He had an Akbar double hired gun deck. And I was like, oh, God, it's one of these ridiculous Hyperloop decks. And he doesn't even have Poe, so he's all in on the loop. This is so dumb. And then he throws out his battlefield, and it's like, Starship Graveyard. I'm like, what the hell is happening? So it was not a Hyperloop deck. It was just, what it was is the resolve your side without paying. So he could have the hired guns be able to just do their damage and not have to pay for them. It was basically a hired guns have good dice if you've got money deck. And he made money, played launch base and that kind of stuff. But so I went for the hired guns first. I got one down to 2 health. He second chanced him. I took off the second chance. Got him down to about 4 health. He second chanced him and dug in him. And so it was just like, dude, really? Like
I call them, so like when we were talking about the Hyperloop deck in general, especially with Poe, like they're just meat sacks. Like that's just how I describe the hired guns. Like, they're just so much health.
Yep.
There's so many ways for yellow and red to give them like more health. It's so obnoxious.
Yeah. Then of course he field mediced him like twice, and I just gave up on him. I was like, fine, I'll get him later. So I killed the other hired gun. Time is getting short. I'm playing a Django deck, and he's playing a pretty aggressive deck, and we ran out of time. I shouldn't say it. We finished with 10 seconds left. So there's about 6 minutes left, 5 minutes left, and I'm getting worried. And so his last turn, like I pop up the second chance, and we go into the last turn, and he has an Akbar with 3 shields, and he has his hired gun with like 5 health. And in one turn, I kill all of it. It was amazing. It was like I rolled out with Bala, had a really good roll, killed the hired gun, unexhaust Bala, roll pretty okay, get on the hunt to pull off the shields, do several more damage, then I go fight dirty, followed by arm to the teeth for the kill. And it was crazy because there were lots of people watching at that point, and he had claimed early, and so I was able to just do it all in sequence, right? And I was like, I go boom, I go boom, I go boom, he's dead. And everyone's like, oh my God, what just happened?
Yellow. I love yellow.
So it was a lot of fun. My last game, Jason, it was one of those games, like one out of every 15 to 20 games ends like this, where you just lose from dice. He had Han Rey. He loads up Rey with a staff and a force throw on turn 2. I killed Rey turn 2. It was awesome. I got a really good fight dirty on with a couple on the hunts. Killer. Naked Han versus all 3 of my guys. Easiest win ever, right? Have you ever even lost that scenario? Is that even possible to lose that scenario?
I bet you it is possible.
Oh, it's possible. So he's able to, basically what happens is I roll garbage for the next, I'd say 17 turns. That's how long the game went. And I rolled nothing, like no damage the whole time. A little bit here and there. He's able to second chance him. He's able to put like a second chance on him. I start doing a tiny bit of damage. He's got the graveyard, so he's getting in the spot where he could potentially loop the second chances. And we're getting, near the end of the game. He's been rolling pretty bad as well because he only has the 2 dice. And that's why the game went so long. And then when he does roll, okay, I'm just mitigating every time. Oh, all my dice are blank, so I might as well he doesn't like you. So we finally get to near the end. I've got my 4 cards left in my hand, 2 in my deck, and I get a spot. He claims. He has to claim really early every time to do the graveyard. And I've got my 2 jetpacks. They're +2, +3. He's got 9 damage on him and a second chance. So I have to have 6 to kill Han. And I've got my Django die there blank. 4 cards in hand. Question, Jason. Do you just keep discarding all 4 till you kill Han?
I guess you would, right?
You have to, right? It's a 1/3 chance 4 times. According to the math, that means you have a 178% chance of success. Actually, I have no idea what the percent is. I don't know how to do that. So I roll blank, reroll blank, reroll +1 resource. Last reroll. I'm shaking it a lot at this point. Like, whoa, I'm never letting this die go. Finally, I roll it out. It's damage. I have that moment, right? Like, oh, it's melee damage. Well, that's just freaking great. And that was basically the end of the game, because after that, I only had the 2 cards. I had to go through a second chance to be able to kill him, and with only 2 cards, there's no rerolls, and I just couldn't beat him. And it was a very frustrating game of just turn after turn after turn of whiffing, and then having that chance to kill him and 4 shots at it and not getting it. It's just one of those moments where you're like, dice determine this game, and that's frustrating. Like, I felt like I outplayed him.
You probably blew your load kind of early, though. I mean, it sounds like Rey going down turn 2, pretty good and fortunate.
Yeah, I had pretty good dice rolls, but they weren't amazing. He just didn't have mitigation. And I also had to use a fight dirty to do it. Like, I had to do a really good fight dirty to knock her out. He said he was very surprised by it. So, yes, it was pretty good early rolling, but then when you have, like, that many turns in a row whiffing with 3 characters, it's very surprising.
I get it.
So it's frustrating, but that's how it was. But I will say this. Let's move on from the tournament play. That is what it is. I want to talk about a deck that I brought last night, hoping to play in the tournament. I'm building a tier list right now. If you go to Patreon, Tiny Grimes, me and my subscribers are building a list, and then there's another thread where everyone's kind of talking about stuff. But a lot of people have said that Rey Qui-Gon is tier 1. And without playing the deck, Jason, does it feel like it would be a tier 1 deck to you?
Absolutely not.
All right, why not? What do you think in theory? Because this is how I look at most decks. It's just theoretically. I don't have the time to play 10,000 amazing decks that FFG has given us. Why don't you think it's tier 1?
Well, I think when you look at Qui-Gon, I think he's very good. I think he's missing a lot of pieces to really allow you to prolong the game and be efficient in the way that he can use that 1 and 2 shield size as well as his passive. For 13, 17, 11 health is strong, but not that strong. His sides are good, but they're not that good. Obviously, the shield's going to be very beneficial for him. And like I said, prolonging the game. Sorry. So he's really looking for a little bit more of a control shell that doesn't exist for blue heroes. Now, for example, the card that we saw that's coming out in the next set, that whenever you roll a shield, you get to turn a die to any side of an opponent's. That's very powerful, and that will definitely help Qui-Gon out a lot. But until then, it looks like you're banking on him. And then we look at Rey, who's a complete support character, and while she can be very volatile with the +2 damage side, it's still controllable. Her dice really aren't that great, and her ability, while good, and does allow you to claim pretty quick because you get additional actions, you're not really abusing it in a deck like this as much as you would in like a Han Rey. Because in Han Rey, you're actually able to do really, really dirty things, getting so much ambush, recycling, so on and so forth, that you really take advantage of the game, and you are actually probably more survivable than even Qui-Gon with Han because of how much ambush you're playing, the shields that you're gaining, so on and so forth. So when you look at that deck, you have to stick to the blue characters. And in my opinion, the health isn't there. That's why I would actually prefer a larger health pool. But I don't think it's a bad deck. I just don't think. I mean, tier 1, you're going to put this up. You're going to say that this is going to be beating the Django decks of the world. Like, I just don't think that that's going to be consistent.
Yeah, and that's those assessments are the same thoughts I had going in. I'd say it was a little bit better than I thought. Rey's really weak dice actually synergize amazingly well with Qui-Gon's dice. So that's a positive, right? Like, it's why the deck is in tier 2 for me. And just to be clear, tier 2 means it's still a good deck. It can even still win a tournament. It's just not going to beat with any consistency the decks that we're calling tier 1. It's more like a 70-30 matchup than a like 50-50 matchup or something. But yeah, playing it, my problem with the deck is that it's a fair deck. Like, that's how I would describe it. It fights fair. It does some damage. It plays some upgrades. It'll slowly ping you away with shields. But it's a pretty fair fighting deck, where you have decks like Django that are cheating, and like you said, the Han Rey deck can cheat out really explosive damage. Qui-Gon doesn't do that. He's an above-board kind of guy.
Yeah, and you're not really getting the pressure that you would get from another deck that people would consider so fantastic, like anything with Vader, where like whenever you activate him, that's happening. And plus, you have to really fear his dice. And some of his dice aren't even able to be controlled by the most popular controls, such as Electroshock. So it puts that little bit of pressure on them that this deck doesn't. What I do like about this deck, though, fits really nice at 29 points, 4 dice. That's a really nice feeling to have those 4 dice. And it does actually have a little bit of burst potential, because it's I very regularly see this deck do 6+ damage just on their hero dice alone. Yeah. So it has that, but yes, it fights a little too fair. The Jedi tricks just are not strong and consistent enough. They're very conditional. So you need to have some things that favor in his condition. And right now, gaining shields, Riposte is an amazing card. That's the card that's going to really fuel the deck and really pull you out of situations that you didn't expect to be in. And it needs a little more than that to do that.
Yeah, and as great as Riposte is, if you play Riposte, you're taking away your fuel for your ping damage, unless you leave one back, and that maybe that's just the way you have to do it. It just feels like it doesn't grab shields fast enough if it's going to be a shield-centric deck. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it just feels like it needs dug in just to be like, okay, you took all my shields and you kind of have that advantage over me. Boom, dug in, they're all back.
I mean, defensive stance is pretty consistent. I mean, it's not that bad.
It just feels like against an aggressive deck, they're just stripping your shields away. And so, he dies pretty quick, I've found. I don't know. I just found he dies quick. And I played it 3 times, and I won 2 of the games, but all of them were close. Like, it doesn't blow people out. That's what I found.
No, it doesn't.
Like, when you play Django...
It's like a starter game.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that. Like, with Django, I feel like about 20% of the time, you could be a person who does not know how to play the game, just roll the dice, and your opponent will go, wow, you just win. And you're like, I do? Oh, that's awesome. You don't have that kind of stuff with Qui-Gon.
Yeah, no, and that's just the strength of that value. And I think that it can kind of get out of hand if Rey is getting those +2s, like I said, but you are at the mercy of your opponent's control. So that's also kind of frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, like in a game where I got binds all things out turn 1 and then put a couple upgrades on right away, then it felt a lot less fair. But, you know, and anyone can run binds all things. It's not like it's especially great with Qui-Gon.
Yep, no, I completely agree. And I think that, like I said, the card that's coming out that we saw is clearly going to be a Qui-Gon card. It's going to go in every Qui-Gon deck as a 2 of, and it is going to be very strong. You know, you can wait to deal with things like, you could even do things like, if you can get more ambush weapons, you can even play things like Holdout Blaster. You could Holdout Blaster Rey, roll Rey, they can respond with Django, and then you can roll Qui-Gon, and should you be able to control his dice.
That'd be pretty cool.
That's just gross, yeah. So I think that there's
some cards that I had in the deck, though, that because I don't play a lot of blue hero, they're just really good. I want to talk about them real quick. One is Force Misdirection. I feel like this card is probably the single best defensive event in the game, theoretically. The problem is I don't feel like heroes support it particularly great right now, but it's so good. Like, I rolled, I was playing Django Double Trooper, and I rolled out my Force Throw as a gun, and I had this in my hand. And I was just like, you are so boned right now, and you do not know it. And John's like, he rolls out like 2 pluses with Veers. I'm like, okay. And then he ends up rolling out Django, and it's like 3 dice of damage, and so it's 5 total dice. I'm just like, I'll Force Misdirect all of them and leave my gun there. It's just insane. The blowout is so high on this card.
Yeah, I mean, it is, like I said earlier, it's very conditional, but it is very strong, and you do need that ability to have that gun, which is another reason why Hold Out Blaster, if you really want to run Force Misdirection, isn't so terrible in those decks.
Yeah.
It also
actually,
provides
it
shields and resources.
because it's blue dice.
Oh, it's only blue die. It's only blue die.
So
okay,
restrictive.
You're right. Even more conditional. So that is frustrating. But yeah, there's going to be one side on most of your force powers that have guns, so that is strong for that reason, but it's not reliable. You can't say like this is a great option to be able to defeat that. Yes, you can get that, but the one thing I find about more Force Misdirection is while it is very big, it also can be very small. It can also literally never come up, and you can just discard it, and that happens a lot.
I think there's going to become a point at some time in the trajectory of this card pool where this card becomes the best defensive event in the game. Like, as blue has some deck where it specifically builds around it, has like a gun hero and a melee hero, or someone who has both sides, like a Django-ish character, and can just really exploit this card.
Well, Chiro has both sides.
It's going to be so good. Yeah,
Sure.
there you go. If Chiro becomes in the meta, it'll be amazing.
I mean,
Another card
for sure.
I totally wrote off. And I had 2 people who gave me lists because I didn't want to try to brew it from scratch and then be like, the deck's bad, and have everyone say, you're an idiot, you're the wrong list. Both lists had a single copy of Anticipate. And both people, I messaged them and said, okay, I cannot play Anticipate. That card is terrible. And both people said, it looks terrible, but it is amazing. And sometimes you will end up discarding it, but there will be at least 2 moments a game where if you have it in hand, you just steal an entire turn, which can be incredibly valuable against, a Django Veers with a bunch of weapons. What have you thought? Have you ever used the card? What's your initial thoughts of it?
I have played it. I do think it is like the single most ridiculous card sometimes. I mean, specifically against Django Veers, it's actually, I think it might be the best defensive card against that deck because of how absolutely ridiculous it can be, and they're just so frustrated, and there's nothing they can do about it. The biggest problem that you see is this cost 2 on blue, and right now blue doesn't really have the resources to be able to do that as well as play their weapons and play that fair game that you mentioned. But if you can sneak this out, it is very, very strong.
Yeah. So I played 3 games with Qui-Gon Ray. I got it off twice in absolutely devastating fashion, taking off 6 dice, and out of those 6 dice, I got like a resource and a disruption, and I didn't have any more resources because I used them on Anticipate.
Yeah, something that I've been really
just crazy
talking about and considering when you're playing a game like Magic the Gathering, for example, like a counter spell, like a classic counter spell where you play it, their spell goes away.
Yep.
They're usually pretty affordable, and in Magic, what happens is you can play a 5-cost, 6-cost creature, and then you play counter spell on it, and it's gone. Yep. You pretty much can remove their turn. The problem in this game is we're putting a lot of value into spending resources to remove dice, for example, Electroshock, when really it actually isn't. While it is amazing, and I do believe you need it, it isn't that efficient of a card. And a card like Anticipate can really, even though they're resolving the damage, like they already rolled it, so like it's already going to come at your face. This is just going to generally still remove 3 to 4 dice. That it really hampers them. It also allows them to not be able to do things like play He Doesn't Like You and things of that nature. So Anticipate I think it's very strong. I think that this large batch removal is going to be better and better as time goes on, and I really like it.
Yeah. Both of the decks had 2 mind tricks, and I hate that card so much. I did not realize that I only owned one of them. So that was dicey. So I went with what I wanted to do anyway, which was 1 mind trick to accommodate to what other people had, and then 1 dodge, which I think is the better choice out of those 2 cards.
Yeah, mind trick is, like I said, it's in dodge. Like the mass removal is probably getting better, and I like that mind trick in that the anticipate they can remove any type of dice, and while they do allow you to resolve them, mind trick still can be a pretty big blowout if they're looking to roll so many dice into a pool. Yeah. Specifically, when you look at the ability to remove all of the dice and then potentially still do some more removal after that. I mean, it's pretty gross. If you can get, I mean, how much does a card have to? I mean, a single card for $2. You think that if it removes 2 dice, that's worth it? Because we're willing to pay a single card and 1 resource for 1 die, and that's generally also that's limiting. It's usually like 2 or less, or a character die, or something. I
mean, it's not that simple though, because of the way the resources work.
Opportunity
you only get
costs,
2 per turn. It becomes a half versus a whole turn, and that's where the balance comes in.
Absolutely, but I'm saying in the field of if you're looking at it in a vacuum of having unlimited money, there is a value to this, and so maybe you're right. Maybe it requires 3 dice, meaning they need to have 5 dice out, which is still pretty common. It's generally their characters plus a single upgrade is going to be 5 dice. So if they ever all get into the pool, mind trick's often going to be worth it. Now you're not going to remove the dice you want always, but you also put them in a tough situation. So it can be, and that's only at 5 dice. I mean, much less they, God forbid, they have 8, 10 dice or 9 dice, and that's really bad.
Yep. I think so to wrap up on Qui-Gon Rey, I think we both agree it's a very solid deck. It is a good deck, but it's not tier 1.
It's so Jedi. It's like we're just like you just have to be better than them like not better than them as a player, just better than like physically the contents and when you're playing it, and you just need to overpower them. Like you're not fight dirty like the yellow cards, and you're not using tactical brilliance like the red cards, and you're not being a jerk Sith.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, very very much like it reminds me of like Stark in Game of Thrones, all right? Like we are above board, we're going to show you all our tricks, and we're just going to overwhelm you with our might. Yeah,
and they have the ability to advance on you, and I think that Jedi's going to have that. I just think it, like I said, that card, the shield card, seems so nuts to me that it's going to make Qui-Gon a better character when that comes out.
Yes, for sure. All right, let's move to another segment that I'm going to call "Hey Tiny, you got to know your cards, man." And so this is applicable to everyone, of course, but it's very key. Sorry, not just to know your cards, but to know all of the cards and what they do. So here's an example of what I mean. I was playing online the other day against somebody, and they had Jango Veers, I believe, and we're getting near the end of the game. Jango's been dead a while. He has 2 cards left in his hand, none in his deck. I looked through his discard pile. I'm pretty sure he's got Electroshock left. He does. I'm playing my Jango Jabba deck. Jango's long since dead. Jabba's loaded up with stuff. So I roll out my dice, and I only need 2 damage to kill him. And I rolled out 2 focus and like 2 blanks on one focus and a blank on a holdout blast or something like that. So I could just flip it and win. But I know he has an Electroshock in his hand. I only need 2 damage to win. And so I'm looking at this, and I'm like, I can't win. I can't win. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And so I even re-rolled it because I was trying to get something else, like 2 focus. So I could do it twice for the Electroshocks. And what's the problem with this scenario, Jason? What am I missing?
That he requires a yellow character to play Electroshock because it requires a spot.
Yeah. So, yes, he did have Electroshock in his hand. He sure did. And I was playing around it very wisely. Except for the fact that you couldn't play it, and I could have just won at any point. And so he's looking at me like, what in the hell is wrong with you? Just win already. What are you doing? So it was a little bit embarrassing when after the game we were both, I was like, I don't understand why you just shocked me. He's like, I don't understand why you thought I could play Shock. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many cards in this game that require spotting or require playing on a character or even other such restrictions that you do need to know when that's possible, and I certainly mess it up all the time. So I think that it's pretty well designed. I like the spot mechanic a lot. It It really does put some weight on powerful cards to be able to do something different. So I think that's it. It's very good. I like it a lot. I really wish that they would balance some different cards that might have been a little more powerful around that spot mechanic. But I really like the conditional cards that they do have in the game. I like the ones that require battlefields. Yeah. I like the ones that require spotting or on a certain type of character, and that allows you to play characters for reasons. And I enjoy that.
Yep, me too. I do want to be very clear on something. I do know that Electroshock says spot a yellow character. I just momentarily forgot. Which is really bad because it's hard to make sure you remember always. So my suggestion is to go through the list of cards that are played. And you don't have to know all of them, but all the meta cards, know which ones say spot or have to have a blue character only or whatever, and know them so well that you just know. Because what's the biggest problem is going to be when you get in a tournament, there's 1 minute left in the round, and your opponent shocks your die. That's the point where you're going to forget it says spot a yellow character because you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about the time and all the people around you and what you're trying to do and how are you going to even finish this game on time. And then he just quickly, because you're all playing fast, right? Like, ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. And he's just like, I'll shock your die. And you're like, I'll do this. And you have to just know so well there that he can't be shocking me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the neutral force event cards and upgrades, and every single one of them requires blue except for disturbance in the force. So like deflect requires a spot, mind trick requires a spot, power of the force only works on your blue upgrades, use the force requires a spot, and it bides all things works only on blue upgrades. So there's a lot of things in this game that require such important things to be on the table, or even like especially in red, there's a lot of targeting of certain colored dice, like generally red dice in red. So there's a lot. So you should definitely take a look at least your cards in your deck so that you're not playing wrong, much less hopping on SW Destiny DB and just scrolling through, going up to the cards. It really doesn't take much time. Just scroll through like, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, yeah, or oh, I didn't know you couldn't play a thermal detonator if you didn't have a yellow character out. It doesn't have to go on a yellow character, but it requires a spot, and it's an upgrade. So
those are the hardest ones to remember, are the spot ones. Another huge one is Tactical Mastery, because that can be such a blowout, and a lot of people will have just that one stormtrooper, and it'll die early to their own cards, cannon fodder, and the best defense, killing it, and then they'll try to use it to do something like roll out Django in response to you, then Tactical Mastery to roll out Bala, and then resolve all their dice, and they can't do that.
Yep.
All right, one other card that this happened, this was the inspiration of this segment, is Willpower. I like Electroshock, I know what it says. Willpower, I totally forgot that it says not only do you have to target an exhausted character of yours, but it has to be an exhausted character of theirs as well. So it's actually way more limiting than I was thinking. Really, if they know you have a Willpower, you can't kill their guy, because they could just not exhaust him.
True. I mean, that's obviously quite a good card just to have it in your hand, and then they don't have to use their character. But that is true. That is true. And also, you could get your character out if you activate before them, and you die to Willpower. You can get your character out before theirs. Then they have to exhaust their character.
Yep.
And then you get to resolve your dice just right before you die. So
yeah, it was pretty funny because I was like the beginning of a turn, and Qui-Gon was almost dead, and so I was like, oh, Willpower onto your Django, and someone was watching the game, and he was like, there's a lot of reasons you can't do that. And I was like, what are you talking about? And John does not know any card that's not like a meta card, so I could have said anything I wanted, and he would just be like, okay, sure. So that was kind of funny.
That is funny.
So yeah, know your cards, and know all the meta cards.
That's a classic Tiny Grimes thing.
Is tournaments, and this is kind of an etiquette thing. And it's not as an etiquette thing as much as it is a general advice of take control of your games, and this goes in so many different facets. If somebody is playing really slow and it's a timed round, you need to be very gently reminding them just to speed up. But the reverse is true with fast players. And Jason, I'm going to ask you, have you ever encountered anyone that was so fast you had to say, excuse me, I would really appreciate if you could slow down a little bit?
Absolutely. Specifically because I have a miniatures background. When you're doing a lot of things, you trip over yourself, you do something wrong, and then the game state might not be as easily repaired as it is in a card game, but still, especially with dice rolls and things like that, people are going to get sour. Yes, the dice are random and a reroll isn't the worst thing, but someone looks at their dice and they rolled the best thing they could roll, and they're like, oh, well, I messed that up. Let me just do this and I'll keep those dice there. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily how it works either. So You want to make sure that you're playing at a tempo that is easy to understand and is also quick enough to make sure the game moves along at an appropriate pace.
Yeah, the reason I bring this up is because last night at the tournament there was a young man there who was he played very well, and by the way, just to be very clear, I'm not calling this person out. I don't think he was being malicious in any way. He was just a person who knew his Han-Rei deck very, very well and played it incredibly fast, and that's all fine. Except for I could hear, like, he was playing next to me. We were at the top tables, and in one game I heard his opponent going, oh, wow, this game is so fast. I can't even keep up. And then he did, like, one of his, like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and play the Holdout Blaster on Ray. That's 2 more actions. Then I'll exhaust Infamous, and I'll play Hans Blaster. And that's 10 more actions. And I'll do this, and this, and this. And finally, the guy, I kind of turned just to see his face, and he looked shell-shocked. And the player who's playing this says, don't worry, I'm not cheating. And the guy goes, I wouldn't have any idea if you were. I don't even know what just happened. So the point is, don't let that happen, right? If your opponent is fast-pacing you into a spot where you feel really overwhelmed, that's where you need to step up and just say, excuse me, this is on me, but I really can't keep up with this. I need you to slow down just a little bit. And be a little bit more clear on what your actions are here.
Let's hope he's not using Infamous on Hans Blaster.
That's
Extra
a good point.
ambushes.
That's a good point. I'm sure he was not. That was an example I just threw out. But I will say this.
But yes, we get what you're saying.
He played our friend John, and he did this whole thing. He did like a 12 move play, and it started with an Infamous onto like a Hunker Down or something. I don't know what he was infamousing. But he didn't do Infamous. He just played the Hunker Down, and in his head, right, he had, because it was part of the trajectory, and he just went, I'll Hunker Down, that gives me an extra action, now I'll play the Holdout Blaster, that gives me 2 actions, then I'm going to play Hans Blaster, now I have 3 actions, and he did like 14 actions before John could get a word in, and John's like, whoa, stop, what? Okay. None of that happened. You played your Hunker Down and did not activate Infamous. It is my turn. And the guy was like, wait, what? And he had rolled tons of dice and re-rolled, and it was a complete disaster. And I felt really bad afterwards because both players felt bad about it. The guy who did it was like, wow, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. And John is like, that threw me off so much from my game because I had this whole plan, and then I totally lost track of what I was doing because I had to like stop this madness, and then we had to repair the game state. And the point is, step in before it's too late if you're uncomfortable, and be proactive in a nice way. Don't be a jerk about it, but be proactive.
Tiny says he's not a jerk about it, but
I was very kind. When I played him in the finals, I was just like, hey man, I've been hearing what's happening next to me. I would really appreciate if you dialed it back a little bit. I'm not saying to play slow. I don't want to play slow. I love snappy games, but I would really appreciate it if you would dial it back a little bit. And he did, and it was great, and it was a very pleasant experience.
It sounds like I also like it quick, but you do, especially when you're doing like tricks like that, like you really need to make sure your opponent's understanding. I see people use like additional things. I often will take I have some tokens, like just like maybe some extra shield tokens, and I'll like, okay, I'm gonna put them out here. Like, okay, I get an action for playing it on Ray. I'm gonna get an action for playing it on using Infamous on this Hunker Down. So there's 2 additional actions. I'll remove, and I'll spend this action, and I'll do this, and I play a Holdout Blaster, and I get 2 more, and then I spend, so that way it's very obvious what I'm doing, and the opponent can understand exactly where I'm at and why it's happening. So especially when you're executing complicated things, you really need to make sure you're slow, concise, and there's a mutual understanding. And like I said, like in John's case, like he messed up at the very beginning. So if John goes to confirm, then he's like, okay, I play Hunker Down. Then I do this. Like, well, actually, you just played Hunker Down. If he was not going so fast, John could have gotten a word in, but fortunately, he was going a million miles a second. So
yeah, and doing it well the rest of the day, as far as I heard. Like he was very efficient with it. It's just really fast. All right. Well, Jason, thanks so much for stopping by. We're gonna bring John Bruno in now to discuss his experiences with Destiny. But thanks so much for stopping by, Jason.
Of course, enjoy the dulcet tones of John Bruno.
All right, so we're going to switch gears here. Flanzer is out the door. We're going to bring in John Bruno, as I said before. But before we get to John, I want to real quick thank my new Patreon subscribers this week. It's been so generous of you all to support me so much. Adam, Gabe, John with a huge donation. Kaigi, Matt, and Nathan. Thanks, gang. Very, very much appreciated. Now, with no further ado, I bring you the 2-time world champion of Game of Thrones, the 8-time champion of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I have no idea how many times he won that. An all-around good guy. What's happening, John Bruno?
What's up, Tiny? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. You know what? You know why I'm doing especially great, John?
Because we get to hang out more often?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, we get to hang out all the time now and play Destiny. Nothing is better than finding a game that you can love and hang out with a friend who also loves the game.
Concur.
All right, John. So I want to ask you some questions as I think, at least I know you as a world-class card game player, and I think others do as well who know you. So this is maybe a doozy for you. As a world-class card game player, how do you feel your skills have translated over to Destiny, which is a game that very much blends both dice and cards?
I think in terms of deck building, you have different restrictions, different games. Some games have 4 times, 3 times, 2 times a card a deck. I think in terms of finding those cards that are versatile and work against a multitude of different deck types, you look for those cards more, and those seem more valuable, where somebody else might look at it and not realize how strong the card is. I mean, like, you posted your top 10 non-character cards, and I pretty much agree with the majority of that list, because those are all those types of cards. So one aspect you have is being able to construct a deck with looking at it bigger picture than just, oh, this seems fun, or hey, this might work with this deck. You're looking for ones that work more for every deck. And the other way I think the experience has helped me so far is reading your opponent, having an idea of, plays that go along with them. I mean, knowing the card pool and having an idea of the plays that go along with that character, what they might have in the card, what the yellow cards, the blue cards, or red cards are, and being able to predict and plan for those.
All right. Yeah, I would agree. That's a really large part of the game that I think a lot of people haven't quite grasped yet, right? It's like you can read a lot about, especially in this game where you can discard so many cards, you can really read a lot about their hand, about what they're actually willing to discard.
Sure, you're sitting there seeing they're doing actions and they're doing other stuff, and they're sitting there with their 2 credits and haven't used their 2 credits yet. Why is that? Maybe they have that event they're waiting to play for 2 credits, and so, or they have that 1 credit just lingering there, and you want to try to disrupt that somehow.
Yeah, a really big one for me is, let's say my opponent has 2 cards in their hand, and you can tell they want to reroll, but they hem and haw about it for a minute and toss a he doesn't like you. That tells me a lot about their hand, right? Like,
what they have left over.
Yeah, they must have something amazing. Like, it's got to be backup muscle or another really cheap removal card. Like, you're not tossing he doesn't like you unless you just feel like you have to.
Exactly. I mean, or they may have that upgrade they're just waiting to play next turn because they need that 1 more credit, or, it's just not the right turn to play, but they have something pretty important in their hand. So that makes me want to try to take that card out of their hand if you can.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I guess we skipped over the basics with you, John. So how long have you been playing Star Wars Destiny?
About a month.
About a month. And I have to guess with the very hard to acquire cards right now that you just don't have many cards, and you know people that are generous and loan you cards?
Well, initially, I didn't have any cards because I wasn't sure if I wanted to play the game. And you let me borrow your cards when we were playing at some local stores, just learning how to play the game just casually. And with your amazing decks and amazing proxies, I was able to learn the game a little bit from there. And then I bought a lot of cards myself. And when that last wave came out, I was able to get 4 booster boxes and picked up a couple other singles through trading in a couple like online places. So other than that, I actually have at least 2 of every card in the game right now.
So it sounds like you haven't been playing long, and you were a little skeptical, and then you jumped in all the way. So what brought you into the game? What was it about this game where you played it a couple times and were like, you know what? I'm in. I want more.
Well, what brought me into the game was, I wanted to be able to see what the game was about. I heard some good things about it, and you were playing it. You got me interested to try it out. So I tried it out. I like Star Wars. I don't consider myself a huge fanboy, but I'm a pretty big fan of like Star Wars in general, but not where I know every single trivia. Like, hey, that one character that showed up for like 2 seconds in one scene and had this like great memorable cough. Oh, he was awesome. And I don't know who that character is.
His name is Grievous. It's General Grievous.
That's right. Tell me when they even mentioned Jabba the Hutt. Not Jabba. Sorry, Jango Fett in the movie. He's on the second movie. They don't even say his name. But anyway, the game I think is a lot more challenging than I expected it to be. When you see dice, and you're thinking dice isn't the most playable, fun game because it's all just randomness. There's not a lot of strategy sometimes that goes into it. And then you play this game, and you have the deck building aspect too. There's always randomness in decks too, but in the 30-card deck, you have a lot more planning, a lot more say what goes into your deck. And to have the deck building aspect along with the dice, and the dice is a whole different mechanic because there's also a lot of strategy in those dice. Do I let them sit on the table until I roll one? Do I want to activate another character, put more into the pool, then I wait to reroll. But the longer they sit there, the more your opponent has a chance to mess with them. Do I want to, use 1 or 2 of them if they're both the same symbol on the side of a die? And then there's also ways, obviously, with focus as one of the sides on some dice, but also being able to pitch cards from your hand to be able to re-roll some or all of your dice. There's a whole lot more strategy in the game because throwing that card away could be pretty important too. So yeah. I like that. I like that there's a lot of strategy in the game with the dice and with the deck.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is you're originally terrified of the randomness, and then as you got into the game, you've realized that the dice actually add more strategy than randomness?
Oh, definitely. The first time I played HeroClix, you want to play HeroClix because you're playing a game with fun characters and everything, and after a while you realize, oh, this game blows. And then you play, because they have these stupid non-unique characters or these like lame characters, and they put some great powers in these characters, and that person just has to roll good dice, and you have like a better team or whatever, and they suck. And so your dice rolls suck. And so like I hate dice rolling games. I tried, HeroClix, and then I went to the next one we had the Dice Masters, and the same thing with that. It's kind of fun at first, fun little character pool, neat little things you do with dice, and it's kind of cool. But then, if I want to play those games, I'll play Warriors. It's a single game. I can play it, game over, I'm done.
Yeah.
But if I want a strategy game, because I've taken a little bit of a break from Game of Thrones, and if I was looking for a strategy game, to a deck building type game where you create your decks and build and construct the decks with a strategy and depth that a lot of other card games have, this is a pretty good game for that reason.
All right. Yeah, I would agree. I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I had very similar fears. I thought this might just be a game I played with my daughter, and I was totally fine with that. And then it was the slow revelation of, wow, there is way more to this game than my daughter can even possibly handle.
Well, one of the things we are lucky about with living in Los Angeles is no matter what niche game you pick up, there's probably a small group of somebody who's playing it.
Yep. And
who knew what size this game was going to be? But this game, all I see is it's growing so far. We have, there almost seems like every single night we have something we could do in Los Angeles with this game. Yeah. And just in a short amount of time, I played 3 tournaments in the last 8 days. And that's
wow.
It's great to get out there and play. So not only is it a fun game to play, there's strategy into it, which is the part I like. I want to exercise my brain when I'm playing the game, and there's also the fact that we have so many people playing. I see the game growing. It's fun to get into a game on the ground level while it's growing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I knew the game was going to be big. I predicted it would be bigger than X-Wing, but it is so much bigger than X-Wing, at least around here. Like, we're getting 16, 17-man tournaments that are growing on Wednesday nights. That's insane.
Yep, exactly. And I just wish FFG would have done a little better job with their distribution, their production, availability of the product, but this game's really grown. Not just around here, but you can see it online, and it's really grown too.
Oh, yeah. You said you've been to 3 tournaments in 8 days, so just so our viewers get an idea of where your skill level is at, how have you done in these tournaments?
My first tournament, I went 3-1. I lost in the last round. The second tournament, I won all my games. I went 4-0. I came in first. And the last night's tournament, I also went 3-1 and lost 1 game. And tied with you for third, but I had fourth based on strength of schedule.
Yeah, so bottom line is you've done very well in a very short amount of time. What do you attribute most to, and what can you maybe impart, what kind of wisdom can you impart to our listeners to get from nothing to highly competitive in a very short amount of time? Is there some secret ingredient? Is there some drug they can take? What can they do?
Watch my videos. No, just kidding. I don't have any. They can listen to heed all the advice from Tiny Grimes because he knows all.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Or actually, what I usually do is I take all of Tiny Grimes' advice and do the opposite, and that usually has a lot of success for me too.
That works. That works really well. Yeah.
But to answer your question seriously, you have to be willing to try new decks. You have to be willing to try cards that some people. I mean, there are a lot of people that turn a blind eye, like, "Oh, that card's not really that good in your deck." Yeah, but I like it. Okay, well, you play it. It's like you have to go sometimes between. Are you playing something because you like it, or do you want to be competitive? Because sometimes they don't mix unless you tweak things more, and some people don't do that. And I also think you learn a lot by playing the different types of decks. There are some people play the same deck every single week, and it could be great. It could be like the deck you feel is the best deck. You play it every week, but you're not really going to grow as a player because you learn how to play that deck. By playing other different types of decks, you learn how to play those decks. So when you face them, you have an idea what's in the deck and what to prepare for against it. So that's why I like to try different decks, because I want to learn all the facets of all the decks. So no matter how I match up against, oh yeah, that card's going to come. This is going to be there. I know it. I want to do it with that character.
Yep.
So that thing, like we have. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, we have a guy in our group. He's going to play the same Poe Dameron Hyperloop deck every single week because he thinks it's the best deck and he thinks he can win with it. Great. You're not really building yourself as a player. You learn how to play one deck, but if you want to get better at the game, play other decks. I mean, is your goal in like little local tournaments to try to come in first every single week, or is it to be better as a player in the game?
Yeah, I mean, a devil's advocate position though is when you play the same deck repeatedly, you really master that deck, right? And then when the big events come around, you've really got it down.
But you're also at a disadvantage because people know you're going to play that deck and they can prepare against it.
That's true. That is a good point. If you're always playing with the same group of players, everyone knows what you're running.
Right.
All right. Well, you said one of the big things is trying to be open to cards other people might not have isolated yet. Are there any cards you found so far that you feel like people are kind of missing out on right now, but you've isolated that they're better than maybe people think?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out. I think the majority of the cards I really like, a lot of people really like. I'm still trying to play around a little bit more with the cost. I mean, anything that's in a 2 or less slot, that's kind of open. You can play it every single turn, right? You get your 2 for that. But I think the cards that are going to be more interesting are going to be the cards that cost 3 or more, and finding ways to get those out. Like, I mean, last night I put a TIE Fighter in my deck for the first time. And when it came up, it was pretty awesome, actually. It was better than I thought it was going to be. It gives you an extra action. You have, something that they can't kill. You have a way to be able to take away shields. You know, the extra strength it gets. I mean, having those cards like that, I think is a little bit of a surprise value for some people. Another card I really like is Prized Possession. I mean, I haven't used it too much. You used it against me before. But imagine you're playing somebody who has that single die for, say, Darth Vader, Jabba the Hutt. They're playing, the Vader Jabba deck. They got one die for Vader. You take away that die, that kills that deck. I mean, it's the same as killing Vader, but it's faster because you don't have to kill him yet. So there's lots of things. There are lots of cards I think to still discover, and I still think there's some pretty cool events out there that people aren't figuring out yet. I really liked Abandon All Hope. Abandon All Hope was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
When I played that card, but that's just if you're leading off, you're the first player. You claim the battlefield before it's your turn to go. You have money. Maybe you have some extra money. Maybe you don't need the money that turn, and you're taking your 2 and spending it, and that totally screws up your opponent's turn. What do I do? Do I lose my entire hand, or do I lose my money? I needed to do stuff with this money, and there's a lot of times that I think cards like that.
I actually, every time this has ever been played on me, I discard the resources, right? But the other night, I had rolled out 2 sides of damage, 2 3-1s, and they played Abandon All Hope on my full hand, and I tossed the whole hand and smashed them in the face for 6.
Nice.
They were very surprised.
Yeah. So there's lots of, I think sneaky cards that you played yesterday against me, a card, Anticipate. That actually played out pretty well for you the 2 times it played. It was a card you overlook sometimes. And I'll tell you another amazing card. I don't know why people aren't playing it. BB-8. No, I'm just kidding. BB-8 sucks.
I was like, really? You like BB-8 that much?
No, BB-8's terrible.
Yeah, one thing I want to say about you, John, is that John has a really keen card game mind, and when we first started, he just said, "Hey, do you have a deck?" I've never played before, right? So I gave him my Han Ray deck. After one play, he's like, "The following 4 cards need to come out, and is there anything that can blow up attachments and upgrades?" And I was like, "Yeah, you can put disarm in." All right, I want disarm. And he's already thinking outside of the box of the regular Han Ray deck, which is really cool about bringing in new players to the game that are highly skilled card players, is they think about decks a little bit differently, and I think it adds some interesting new life to decks.
Well, like the Django Veers deck, a lot of people play that very aggressive. Let's go all out, do as much damage as we can, claim the battlefield, and they're playing the battlefield that is the one that removes a character die from the pool. And I mean that's fine, but I play Jingo Veers and I play it completely different. I like the extra actions. I don't want to be the first one done. I want you to go through and be done with all of your actions, and then I can go through and just finish you off when you can't do anything against me. As long as you're active, you can mess me up. Yeah. But if I do out of the field first, excuse me, then I have a chance to do things you can't control. So I don't always want to end that way. There are times I do come out. And that's the other thing too. You got to change your play style depending on what deck you're playing against.
Yep, I think that's one of the big things is be willing to be flexible. Sometimes you got to leave damage on the board to claim, and sometimes you want to purposely go slow so that you can do your tricks without them being able to interrupt them as easily.
Absolutely.
So John, what would you say so far has been your favorite deck that you've played? Because I've seen you play quite a few decks. You've got all the cards. You're experimenting. What do you like best so far?
Obviously, the most successful deck has been the Django Veers deck. A deck I have had a lot of fun with because I've only played it a few times, but I probably had a lot of fun so far with the Qui-Gon Ray deck. Ray is a lot of fun. I have Vader Jabba. That's kind of okay. I have a couple of decks I'd like to try, but the one I probably think is the most fun for me is the Qui-Gon Ray deck. That's probably one. Akbar Luke is a lot of fun too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. What's fun about that is those both to me are really solid tier 2 decks that can win, but probably not at that upper echelon.
And that's probably why I like them more. The tier 1 decks, that you have, like Django Veers is a very, very good deck, right? If you're doing Django, Balatic, and a Stormtrooper, that's a very good deck. There are decks, I think, there's probably maybe a good handful of decks that people consider to be top-level decks, right? But to me, it's more fun to try that tier 1.5, tier 2 deck and make it a better deck. Because sometimes you can have a really good deck that somebody feels like is one of the best in the meta. Somebody else's hands, they don't do as well with it.
Oh, yeah.
And just like the other way around can happen. You could take a tier 2 deck and somebody else's hands, they can make it and play it as a tier 1, even though it's not tier 1.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's a guy I play online, and he really likes Dooku Kylo, and he smashed me twice when I was running my Jango Bala Trooper deck, and I was just a little bit surprised. He played it very well. One of the games went his way, but one of the games did not go his way, and he still smashed me. I was a little bit surprised.
Yeah, and I've been playing mostly aggressive decks so far, right? Aggro decks. I'm interested in really putting a good discard deck together, trying to the total discard deck. And I got a couple ideas, but I haven't had the time to sit down and really look at those yet.
Okay. Well, maybe that's something we'll unveil in a future episode.
That'd be fun.
So what's been your favorite card so far?
My favorite card is He Doesn't Like You. It's such an amazing card. I mean, this is a non-character card, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of as an event. I mean, if I had to categorize them, but I think He Doesn't Like You just because it's so good. The best cards are the 0 and 1 cost that you can fill in. I mean, anything that just boom like that, it totally messes up your whole opponent's turn. Just taking out that one die. Electroshock is the same way. I mean, He Doesn't Like You. I mean, that's why I want to play like yellow all the time. Just because those two cards are amazing.
Yep.
They're probably, I think, two of the best cards in the game. But in terms of characters, just the character ability, I don't know. I mean, Django's pretty awesome. I mean, anytime you get to cheat like that is pretty good. So Django's probably one of the coolest characters so far. In terms of weapons, I have actually been surprised how much I really like that little 1 cost.
Oh, yeah.
Gun. I mean, it's 1 cost. I get to play that first turn, do extra damage, and still have extra 1 to do electroshock or something else. I mean, that little 1 cost gun is pretty awesome.
I can't believe you didn't know that was the DH-17 blaster pistol.
Oh my gosh, I know. I think that guy who coughed in that one scene carried one of those guns.
What kind of Star Wars fan are you?
I know. By the way, Balatik. Who the hell is Balatik? Okay, really. I know he's in the 7-7.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell who he was. Anyway, I saw it 3 times. Jeez.
He's amazing. They cut all his good scenes, I guess. I don't know.
Apparently.
Maybe Lucas had all these awesome scenes he had access to, and then they're like, "I'm sorry, Lucas, we had to cut them all." And he was like, "What? I made Balatik awesome. You screwed me, man." Right.
Yeah. It's like I can't wait till they make that Beast on die, from Rogue One. They put him in that stupid Galaxy of Heroes games, and he's like in 3 scenes. They show him barely in one of the fighters and up in the sky, and that's it. Whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, let's make a whole character card for him.
Why not?
Yeah.
John, any other advice you want to give to our listeners here today?
Like I said, I think just try being versatile. Is definitely a great idea even like a lot of people go online and look at decks that people have had success with. I mean, sure, that's a good way to start. Build it and play it. Mm-hmm. But don't feel like that's the Bible. Make changes that work for you. If something works for you and doesn't work for somebody else, play it. Don't be afraid to make changes that other people suggest too, because sometimes they might actually work. But no, just be flexible and try different decks is probably the best thing. And have fun with the game. It's just a game. Have fun with it.
Yeah, I think that's such a great piece of advice because, especially for newer players, and especially with the CCG, right, with a card pool that's hard to acquire, I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of like, all right, this is what a Vader Jabba deck looks like, and I'm just going to build that one, and I have access to the card, so I wouldn't mind putting in Crime Lords, but I'm not going to because that'd be too expensive, or it becomes kind of hard to experiment, but break out as much as you can and experiment. Don't think that a posted deck list is the final list.
And, don't be afraid to try decks out and lose, because I always learn a lot more in a loss than I do in a win.
Yes, that is such a good piece of advice. I hate losing. Like, I kind of have a problem with when it comes to losing, but at the same time, losing is so valuable in warm-up games, right? Just learning about your deck, learning about weaknesses. When you win every game, it's so hard to identify holes in your deck and your game. It's those losses where you really have to pay attention.
Absolutely.
All right, John. Well, thanks so much for stopping on the Smugglers Den this week. I am sure we'll have you on again sometime soon. And remember, you can always check out the program and support us at brokenegggames.com. Put TG Games in the discount code coupon. You can go to Patreon, Tiny Grimes, where we're doing all kinds of cool stuff. And John, is there any place they can find you on the internet?
I think it's probably some of those X-rated sites, but I don't know. Not safe for work sites, maybe. No, not anywhere. I'm on Facebook somewhere, but that's kind of about it. I don't do anything special.
Okay, so you don't have a video series, John Bruno Rock Star Wars Destiny or anything?
No, not yet. Not yet. I'm working on it, I'm sure.
Okay, good. Well, thanks so much for stopping by, John, and thank you to Jason for coming by again this week, and I'll see you next time on the Smugglers Den.